Get her out of my house right now. Michael Stone's angry voice rang through the big hallway like thunder, making everyone jump, even the security guards standing by the door. His voice was cold and mean, the kind of voice that made people obey without asking questions. Sarah Miller stopped in the middle of the stairs, still holding her cleaning mop in her shaking hands. Her work clothes were wet and stuck to her arms. Her breathing was fast and scared. Just a few minutes ago, she had pulled his little girl, his 6-year-old adopted daughter Lily, out of an elevator filled with smoke, but now she was being blamed. The smell of burnt wire still on her uniform. Michael's eyes were full of anger. He grabbed Lily's tiny wrist too tight and pulled her closer to him. You could have hurt her. Do you know how expensive that elevator is? His words hit Sarah like punches. She took a step forward trying to explain. Sir, it was sparking. She was stuck inside. Stop, he snapped, pointing at her like she was dirt on his floor. Don't say another word. You don't get to talk in my house. You don't even get to breathe in my house. Pack your stuff and leave before I call the police. Lily whimpered and pulled on her father's shirt sleeve. Daddy, please. Enough, he shouted, making the little girl jump back with tears filling her big brown eyes. Sarah swallowed hard and tried to keep her voice calm. Mr. Stone, I didn't break anything. I just heard her crying. You think I pay you to touch my daughter? He stepped closer, standing over her like a giant, his fancy cologne mixed with the smell of burnt plastic. I trusted you in my home. I gave you a job, and this is how you pay me back. Lying, sneaking around, putting my child in danger. Behind him, the head of security looked uncomfortable and shifted his feet. Sir, maybe we should check. Michael cut him off, his voice getting louder. Take her out now. Sarah's throat felt tight. She bent down to pick up her cleaning cloth, her fingers shaking. A single drop of dirty water fell from it and spread across the shiny marble floor like spilled ink. Please, she whispered. At least let me explain to Lily. Michael slammed his fist against the wall so hard it made a loud bang that echoed through the hallway. Lily jumped, and the violence of that sound scared her. She pulled away from his hand and shouted with her small voice breaking. Stop it. She saved me. For one heartbeat, everything went silent. The guards stopped moving. The housekeeper froze. Even the ticking clock seemed to pause. Michael blinked, surprised by what his daughter said. What did you say? Lily's tears ran down her cheeks. She saved me, Daddy. The elevator had smoke everywhere. She pulled me out, but the rich man's pride closed around him like a shield. His jaw got tight. You're confused, he said coldly. You were scared. She caused the problem. No, Lily sobbed, stamping her little foot on the ground. She didn't. You're being mean to her. Take her to her room. Michael ordered the nanny, turning his back on his daughter's cries. Two guards stepped forward. One gently pushed Sarah toward the door while the other picked up her small bag from the corner. As she walked past the stairs, Sarah looked back one time. Lily was fighting in the nanny's arms, reaching out toward her. Miss Sarah, the girl screamed. Don't go, please don't go. But the guards kept pulling Sarah along, their heavy boots making loud sounds on the marble floor. The big doors opened to show the gray rain outside. Cold rain hit her face like tiny needles. She held her bag against her chest, shivering, half shocked by what just happened. Behind her, the mansion stood tall and quiet, its windows looking like eyes that never blinked. She heard the lock click, a final metal sound, and she knew she had just been erased from that world. She stumbled down the wet steps, her shoes slipping on the stone. At the gate, she turned around one more time. Through the upstairs window, she saw Lily pressed against the glass with her small hands spread out and her mouth moving without sound through her tears. Sarah whispered to herself, I did the right thing. Though her voice cracked and almost broke, she turned away and walked into the rain, her body disappearing into the gray fog rolling off the hills. Inside the mansion, Michael stood still in the center of the hall, still breathing hard. The silence after his angry outburst felt heavier than the storm outside. The housekeeper was too scared to speak. He straightened his shirt cuffs, trying to stop his fingers from shaking. Clean this mess, he ordered with a flat voice, and make sure every key she ever had is changed. As the workers scattered to do what he said, Lily's cries could be heard faintly from upstairs. She saved me. Daddy, why are you so mean? Michael rubbed his head, closing his eyes for a moment. But he said nothing because his pride was louder than his guilt. When the lights flickered again, he looked down and saw Sarah's mop still lying where she had dropped it. A trail of muddy water stretched across the marble floor like a wound, thin and clear, cutting through his perfect world. He turned away from it and climbed the stairs, leaving the stain behind. But even as he reached Lily's door, her voice still echoed in his mind. Shaking and brave, "She saved me." He closed his eyes, but the words would not go away. The rain didn't stop that night. It drummed on the roof of the Brooklyn apartment building. Water seeped through the old window frame and pooled on the chipped windowsill. Sarah Miller sat at her kitchen table with her shoulders hunched, still wearing her wet uniform. The clock on the wall said 9:47 at night. The kitchen smelled like cleaning soap and old coffee. Marcus, her 9-year-old son, walked into the room in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "You're late, Mom," he said softly. She looked up and tried to smile. "I know, sweetie, I'm sorry," he frowned at her. "You look really tired." "Just a long day," she said, pouring him a cup of warm milk from the small pot on the stove. Her hands shook a little bit. Marcus climbed into the chair across from her and studied her face carefully. "You didn't eat dinner." "I wasn't hungry," she replied. He pushed his cereal bowl toward her. "Then eat mine, I already had some." She stared at him for a moment, hearing the gentle strength in his voice and seeing it in his small body. Then she took a spoonful and forced herself to chew it. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, looking satisfied, and started humming a song under his breath. It was the same tune she used to sing while cleaning. "You are my sunshine." The melody caught at her throat and made her want to cry. When he finished humming, he said, "Something bad happened at work, didn't it?" Sarah paused before answering. "Why do you think that?" "Because you're quiet," he said, "and when you're quiet like this, it means somebody was mean to you." She wanted to tell him everything, to pour out all the unfair things that happened and how embarrassed she felt. But what good would that do? She didn't want to fill him with angry feelings. "It's okay," she said finally. "It was just a misunderstanding." Marcus tilted his head to the side. "Are they going to call you back to work?" She swallowed hard. "I don't think so." He thought for a moment, then said, "You always tell me that doing the right thing matters, even if nobody says thank you." His words made her chest feel tight. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's true, sweetheart, but sometimes doing right costs more than we think it will." Outside their window, the rain slowed down to a light mist. The city hummed with the sounds of faraway traffic, the sound of people surviving. Sarah looked around their small apartment at the peeling paint on the walls, the second-hand furniture they'd bought from thrift stores, and the photo of her late husband stuck on the fridge with a magnet. She felt both grateful for what she had and trapped by what she didn't. She had promised Marcus a better life, but tonight that promise felt thin and weak. She rinsed the dishes in the sink, hung her wet uniform on the back of the door to dry, and lay down beside Marcus when he fell asleep. In the dark, she whispered a prayer. "God, please let them see the truth." Across the river in the mansion made of marble and glass, Michael Stone stood by the window of his office. The rain streaked down the glass windows, showing his reflection looking stern, tired, and haunted by what happened. The clock read almost midnight. He had poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey but hadn't taken even one sip. Lily had cried herself to sleep hours ago, her small body curled up under her pink blanket in her room. He could still hear her words echoing in his mind. "She saved me," he told himself out loud. The child was confused. The scary moment played tricks on her memory. Yet something about the way she had screamed those words kept replaying in his head over and over. His hands turned white as he gripped the glass tighter. He had built his whole life on control, on facts and contracts and results. Feelings had no place in that world of his, but tonight, his certainty about being right cracked just a little bit. He walked over to the fireplace and stared at the dancing flames. "She put my daughter in danger," he muttered to himself. Saying it out loud was supposed to make it sound true, but it didn't work. The door creaked behind him, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, appeared holding a folded towel. "Sir," she said carefully. "Lily's asleep now, but she asked for Miss Sarah before she closed her eyes." Michael's jaw got tight and hard. "That woman is never to be mentioned again in this house, do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Mrs. Patterson hesitated, looking nervous. If I may say so, she did seem honest when she tried to explain what happened. Enough. His voice snapped like a whip cracking. You work for me, not for her. The old woman lowered her eyes to the floor. Of course, sir. She set the towel down on a chair and quietly left the room. Michael sank into his big leather chair and pressed his fingers against his head. The silence that followed felt like it was choking him. He glanced toward the staircase, half expecting to hear Lily's light footsteps coming down, but there was nothing, just the steady beat of rain on the roof. The next morning, he got up early and went through his usual routine like a robot: coffee, reading emails on his computer, a quick run on the treadmill in his gym. Everything he did was exact and efficient and showed no feelings at all. When he walked past Lily's room, he stopped at her door. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her nightgown, holding a stuffed teddy bear that Sarah had fixed for her months ago when it ripped. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said gently, trying to sound kind. She didn't look up at him. "I don't want breakfast. You need to eat something," he said. "I want Miss Sarah." Her simple words made him sigh. "That's not possible anymore." "Why not?" she asked. "Because she doesn't work here anymore." "Because you yelled at her?" Her question hit him like someone threw a rock at his chest. "Because she made a mistake," he said stiffly, his voice tight. "She didn't make a mistake," Lily whispered, looking down at her bear. "You did." He felt something twist deep inside his stomach. "That's enough, Lily. I won't talk about this anymore." She turned her face to look out the window. The silence between them grew heavy like a thick blanket. Later that morning at his office downtown, Michael's assistant brought him a folder full of papers. "About the elevator incident, sir. The maintenance people say the electrical wire shorted out because of water moisture in the air. It wasn't tampered with or broken by anyone." He stopped in the middle of signing a paper. "Say that again." "It was an old cable, sir. It just wore out and stopped working." The assistant hesitated before continuing. "There's no record of any staff member doing anything wrong." Michael's hand squeezed the pen tighter. "Thank you. You can leave that folder and go." When she left his office, he leaned back in his big chair and stared at the city skyline outside his window. For the first time in many years, the numbers on his computer screen got blurry. All he could see was the image of a woman's shaking hands pulling his daughter to safety, while smoke curled around them both. By evening time, when he returned home, Lily was sitting in the living room watching cartoons on TV with the volume turned down low. She looked up as he walked in. "Did you find Miss Sarah?" she asked with hope in her voice. "No," he said quietly. "You're not going to look for her, are you?" she asked. Already knowing the answer, he didn't say anything back. She turned back to the television, but her eyes had tears in them that made them shine. Upstairs in his office, he poured another drink and stood staring out into the darkness. The rain had finally stopped, but the world outside still looked gray and sad. Pride, he realized, was a poor substitute for feeling peaceful. In Brooklyn, Sarah woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was a text message from her landlord saying, "Rent is due tomorrow, or I'll have to post an eviction notice on your door." She sat up in bed, rubbing her tired eyes. All the worry came crashing back down on her like heavy weights. She thought about calling one of the temp job agencies, but most of them had already heard about her getting fired. In her world, bad rumors traveled faster than the truth ever could. Marcus stirred in his bed beside hers. "It's okay, Mom," he mumbled sleepily without opening his eyes. "Something good will happen soon." "I can feel it." She smiled just a little bit and brushed his curly hair away from his forehead. "I hope you're right, baby." She didn't know that somewhere across the city, a man who had destroyed her life was sitting alone in a huge house full of silence, haunted by the memory of a 6-year-old's cry, "She saved me." The truth had begun to wake up beneath his pride like a seed pushing up through hard stone, trying to grow. The morning sun over Connecticut looked soft and gentle, but inside the stone mansion, tension still hung in the air like leftover smoke. Michael sat at the long dining table with untouched breakfast in front of him: black coffee, a slice of toast, and a plate of scrambled eggs that had gone cold. Lily sat across from him with her chin resting on her small hand. Her cereal had gotten soggy in the bowl. The silence between them was so thick it felt like you could choke on it. "Eat your breakfast," he said quietly. She didn't move her spoon. "Lily," he said again, her eyes lifted up to look at him. dark and not blinking at all. Do you even care that she's gone? The question hit him harder than he expected it to. Of course I care, he said stiffly. That's exactly why I had to fire her. She put you in danger. No, she didn't, Lily shot back, her voice shaking with both anger and fear. You did. You yelled really loud. You scared me. You scared her too. Michael's jaw muscles got tight. That's enough of that kind of talk. You're mean, Lily blurted out. Then she pushed her chair away from the table and ran down the hallway, her bare feet slapping the floor hard. The sound echoed up the marble staircase and through the whole house. Michael stood up halfway, wanting to call after her, but his pride held him back and kept him still. He sat back down in his chair, breathing out sharply through his nose. Across the table, Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, kept herself busy with the dishes, pretending she couldn't hear what was happening. She's only 6 years old, Michael said, more to himself than to her. Children forget things quickly. The old woman paused with her hands shaking slightly as she held a plate. Sometimes, sir, she said gently and carefully, they remember the right things longer than we grown-ups do. When she left the room, Michael's hand found his coffee cup. It was already cold and bitter. That same morning across the city, Sarah Miller walked out of a temp job agency on 8th Avenue with her resume folded tightly in her hand. The air outside smelled like hot pretzels from a street cart and bus exhaust fumes. A man on the corner was handing out flyers advertising a cleaning service. She took one without really thinking about it, then sighed when she read the small print at the bottom. It said part-time work only, no health insurance, no benefits at all. She needed full-time work with steady hours, not odd jobs here and there that barely covered her rent payment. She kept walking, stepping over puddles left from last night's storm, heading toward the subway station entrance. When she reached the top of the stairs going down, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Someone had left her a voicemail. It was from Mrs. Patterson. Sarah stopped walking and hesitated before pressing play. The woman's voice came through the phone speaker, low and careful. Sarah, it's me. I shouldn't be calling you, but I wanted you to know something important. The maintenance report came back, and it says the elevator shorted out from a humidity leak in the wall. It wasn't your fault at all. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Sarah stopped in her tracks right there on the busy sidewalk, her heart pounding hard in her chest. The noise of the station and the people around her seemed to blur and fade away. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe properly. She closed her eyes tight, gripping the phone in her hand. A single tear slid down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. She whispered, "Thank you so much," even though she didn't know if anyone could hear her or not. Back in the mansion, Michael stood at the tall window of his office, watching Lily chase soap bubbles in the garden below with her nanny. The little girl's laughter used to make him smile every time he heard it, but now it just reminded him of what he had broken between them. He turned away from the window with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His assistant had sent him the same maintenance report earlier that morning, confirming exactly what Mrs. Patterson had said. The truth was right there in black and white letters on official paper. It said clearly, no staff error detected, but admitting that truth meant he had to face what he had done wrong and what kind of man he had become. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was his lawyer calling to ask if he wanted to press charges against the fired employee for lying about him, like one of his public relations managers had suggested earlier. He hung up the phone without even replying to the question. Later that afternoon, Michael drove his car into the city by himself, which was something he rarely did anymore. He told people it was for a business meeting, but really he didn't know why he was going there. He only knew that the silence at home had become unbearable to sit in. His fancy Tesla car slid smoothly through the Manhattan traffic like it was on rails. Every red traffic light reflected his face back at him in the windshield, looking tired, rigid, and completely unsatisfied with everything. He ended up parking his car near the East River, where street musicians were playing old Motown songs for spare change in their hat. It was the kind of place Sarah might walk through, he thought to himself, though he wouldn't admit that out loud to anyone. As the sun began to get lower in the sky, he saw a young woman from far away helping an elderly man pick up his dropped grocery bags near the sidewalk curb. The way she moved, the calm tone of her voice as she spoke to him, it made something twist uncomfortably inside Michael's chest. But when he got closer, it wasn't Sarah at all. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed by that. That night back home, Lily refused to eat dinner again. When he tried to convince her to take at least one bite, she folded her arms across her chest stubbornly. "I'm not hungry at all." "You can't keep skipping meals like this," he said with concern. "I don't care," she replied. "Don't talk to me like that," he warned her, his voice getting stern. "Then stop being mean to people," she shouted back at him, her small hands balling up into tight fists. "You scared Miss Sarah away," and made her leave. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Her accusation hurt more than he wanted to admit to himself. "Lily," he said more quietly this time, "I was trying to protect you from getting hurt." "You're lying," she said with her voice breaking into pieces. "You don't protect me." "She did. She was the one who protected me." Then she ran upstairs as fast as her little legs could carry her, slamming her bedroom door so hard it made a huge bang. The sound echoed through the entire house and shook the expensive paintings hanging on the walls. Later that evening, as the hall went completely dark, Michael found himself standing outside her bedroom door. He could hear her crying softly on the other side of the wood. He reached for the door handle to go in, but stopped his hand halfway there. What could he possibly say to her that would make any of this better? The words, "I was wrong," felt like foreign money in his mind. Valuable, but impossible to actually spend or use. Across the city in her small apartment, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed reading job listings on her old cracked laptop computer. Marcus was asleep beside her with one arm draped across his pillow. She had seen worse times before this, she told herself, trying to stay strong. She had worked through grief after her husband died, through complete exhaustion, through terrible fear. But this embarrassment and humiliation was different somehow. This was something that ate away at your soul from the inside. Yet the voicemail message from Mrs. Patterson kept replaying in her mind like a song on repeat. It wasn't your fault. Those simple words were like a tiny spark glowing in the darkness. She opened her old notebook and began to write down a list of potential clients she could clean for privately: churches, community centers, small businesses run by nice people. She wouldn't beg to work for rich people again. Not after experiencing this kind of treatment. She turned off the bedside lamp and watched the city lights flicker and twinkle through her thin curtain. Somewhere out there in one of those big buildings, the man who had shouted at her and thrown her out into the storm was probably sleeping on silk sheets in a giant bed. But she had something he didn't have. She had peace in the small things that mattered. A child's steady breathing beside her, a roof over her head that was hers to keep, and a clean conscience that let her sleep at night. In his mansion across town, Michael Stone lay wide awake in his huge bed, staring up at the ceiling in the darkness. Lily's words kept whispering over and over in his head. "She saved me. She saved me. She saved me." They wouldn't fade away or go quiet. They became like a rhythm, a heartbeat he couldn't silence no matter how hard he tried. And for the first time in a very long time, the billionaire, who thought he had absolutely everything in the world, felt completely, totally, unbearably small and alone. The next morning came with gray skies and heavy clouds, as if the sky itself hadn't forgiven anyone for what happened. Sarah woke up before her alarm clock went off. For a long moment, she just sat on the edge of her bed staring at the chipped wallpaper peeling off the walls. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen filled the silence around her. Marcus's gentle snoring sounds came from the other side of the thin wall between their rooms. She took a slow, deep breath, gathering herself together the way soldiers must gather themselves before marching into a battle they know they might lose. Then she got up from bed, tied her hair back in a ponytail, and opened the window to let in some fresh air. The air outside smelled like rain and hot asphalt from the street. Somewhere down below in another apartment, someone was frying bacon for breakfast. The smell reminded her that the world kept going on and on, even when your own personal world felt like it had stopped completely. She started making breakfast for Marcus: scrambled eggs with a little bit of leftover ham mixed in, and toast that had to be coaxed out of their old toaster that didn't work quite right anymore. Marcus stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing his sleepy eyes with his fists. "Morning," he mumbled in a sleepy voice. "Good morning, baby. Eat it while it's still hot," she said, putting the plate in front of him. He climbed up onto his chair and sat there studying her face carefully. "Did you find any work yet?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. Not yet, but I will find something, I promise. They were wrong about you, he said firmly, like he was completely sure of it. People can be wrong really loudly sometimes, she said, giving him a small smile. That's true, he said, and he grinned a little bit back at her. Some of the heavy feeling in her chest got a little bit lighter after they finished breakfast together. She packed Marcus a small lunch in a paper bag and walked with him to school, holding his hand the whole way on the street. Men wearing work boots shouted hello and good morning to each other. Women carried heavy laundry bags on their shoulders. Taxi-cab horns blared loudly from cars passing by. It was a city alive and buzzing with struggle and survival. At the corner near the school, Marcus squeezed her hand tight. You always say we have to keep moving forward no matter what, he said, looking up at her. That's what we do, right, Mom? She bent down and kissed his forehead gently. That's exactly what we do, sweetheart. He ran off toward the school gates, waving at her before disappearing inside with all the other kids. She stood there for a while, watching the long line of children walking in, each one of them carrying their own invisible battles that nobody else could see. Then she turned around and started walking toward the subway station to look for more work, across the river in the stone mansion. Michael sat at his big desk with his eyes on his laptop computer screen, but he wasn't reading a single word on it. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. He had canceled all his meetings for the day. He told himself it was because he was tired, but the real reason was guilt eating away at him. He still hadn't apologized to Lily properly. He hadn't even admitted to himself yet that he owed Sarah an apology too. A knock on the door broke through the silence in the room. Mrs. Patterson stepped inside holding a small silver tray. Coffee, sir? She asked politely. He nodded without looking up. Yes, thank you. And sir, she added very gently, I found this on the kitchen counter last night. She placed a tiny bracelet down on his desk. It was a child's bracelet made of cheap plastic beads and one cracked heart-shaped charm dangling from it. It belongs to Miss Sarah, she explained. Lily told me she dropped it on the day of the elevator incident. Michael picked up the small bracelet carefully. The beads were chipped and worn. The elastic string was frayed and about to break, but it carried something painfully human with it, something real. He turned it over and over in his fingers the way a person might hold a piece of evidence from a crime they can't undo or fix. Throw it away, he said finally, his voice flat. Mrs. Patterson didn't move from her spot. Sir, with all respect, she saved your little girl's life. Maybe you shouldn't throw this away too. Their eyes met for a long second before he spoke again. Just leave it here on the desk, he said quietly. After she left the room, he sat there staring at the bracelet for a long time, the tiny heart charm reflecting the morning sunlight coming through the window. Downstairs in the living room, Lily sat on the floor near the big window, playing with her dolls, but doing it in complete silence. She looked smaller somehow, like she had shrunk. When Michael came down the stairs and walked over to her, she looked up at him. I don't want to go to the park today, she said. Why not, sweetheart? He asked, trying to sound gentle. Because Miss Sarah used to come with us to the park, she said simply. She didn't come with us, he said, but the lie tasted bitter and wrong in his mouth. She just worked here. That's all. Lily's lips got tight and thin. She didn't just work here. She helped me with everything. He let out a long breath and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Lily, people sometimes make mistakes. That's just part of life. You did, she said simply, just those 2 words. He froze completely still. Not knowing what to say, she turned back to her dolls and started humming softly. It was Sarah's song. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. The sound of that song went through him like a sharp knife blade. He left the room without saying another word to her. That afternoon, Sarah met with the pastor at a small community church in Brooklyn. The place smelled like wood polish and fresh coffee. She sat across from him in his modest little office, twisting her hands nervously in her lap. I just need a few hours of work each week, she said honestly. Cleaning, organizing, anything at all really. I'll do whatever needs doing. The pastor was a kind-eyed man in his 60s, and he nodded slowly. We could definitely use the help around here. Though I have to be honest, it's not much money, maybe 20 hours a week at most, and the pay is pretty modest. That's completely fine, she said quickly, relief flooding through her. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. He smiled warmly at her. You've been through something difficult recently, haven't you? She hesitated before answering. Something that wasn't fair, yes. Then maybe you're exactly the kind of person we need working here, he said. The kind of person who truly understands grace and forgiveness. When she left the church building that day, the sun had finally broken through the gray clouds overhead. A group of volunteers were setting up a free lunch stand on the sidewalk outside, giving food to anyone who needed it. She joined them without even thinking about it, tying on a spare apron and helping them hand out cups of soup to people passing by on the street. An old man with a worn coat thanked her, saying, "You're a real blessing, young lady." For the first time in weeks, she actually believed those words might be true. That same evening back in Connecticut, Michael sat alone in his office staring at the maintenance report again for the 100th time. He zoomed in on the time-stamped photographs attached to it. The smoke, the elevator door stuck halfway open, the faint blur of a woman's arm reaching into the danger to pull someone out, Sarah's arm reaching in to save Lily. He leaned way back in his chair, still holding that cheap bracelet in his hand. Pride was such a strange thing. He thought it could build entire empires and destroy them in the exact same breath. Upstairs, he heard Lily call out, "Daddy," in a small voice. He stood up and went to her room. She was sitting up in her bed, clutching her teddy bear tight against her chest. "Will Miss Sarah ever come back here?" she asked with hope and sadness mixed together in her voice. He hesitated, not wanting to lie, but not knowing how to tell the truth. "No, sweetheart, she won't be coming back." Lily's chin started to quiver and shake. "Then I don't want to stay here anymore either." "This is your home," he said softly, trying to comfort her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's your home, not mine. I don't belong here without her." When she turned away from him to face the wall, something deep inside his chest cracked open. That night, as the huge house went completely dark and quiet, Michael stood by the window of his office and watched the stars glinting and shining over the lawn outside. The bracelet still lay on his desk, glowing faintly in the light from his desk lamp. He finally whispered into the silence of the empty room, "What have I done? What kind of person have I become?" And for the first time in many, many years, the man who never apologized for anything said those words like they were a prayer to God. The next few days passed by in quiet disorder and confusion. The stone mansion looked exactly the same as always on the outside, with floors polished until they shined, silver decorations gleaming, and roses trimmed in perfect straight lines in the garden. But the rhythm and heartbeat of the house had been broken into pieces. Lily stopped talking to her tutors completely. She ate very little food, and when the nanny tried to convince her to go for a walk outside, she refused every single time. She spent hours and hours sitting by the window in her room, tracing her finger along the cold glass as if she could somehow draw Sarah's face back into existence by doing that. Michael noticed all of this happening, but he had absolutely no idea how to fix any of it. He had built huge companies from nothing. He had saved giant fortunes from collapsing. He had crushed his competitors in business without even blinking, but he had no idea at all how to reach into a child's wounded heart and heal it. On Thursday morning, while the world outside glittered with bright summer light, Michael sat in his office staring at an email that had just come in from his public relations department. The subject line read, "Elevator Incident Media Inquiry." The body of the email included a journalist's request for comment about rumors that a domestic worker had been fired after a near accident involving the CEO's adopted child. He leaned way back in his chair, his jaw muscles clenching tight. The story wasn't public yet, but if it reached the press and got into the newspapers, his reputation for humanitarian leadership would be completely shredded and destroyed. He thought about damage control, about issuing an official statement denying everything. Then he thought about Sarah's face on the day she was thrown out of his house into the rain. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway of his office. "Sir," she said very gently, "Lily's not doing well at all." He looked up quickly. "What do you mean by that?" "She's not eating anything. She's not talking to anyone. The nanny says she wakes up at night crying in her sleep." He closed his laptop computer immediately and stood up quickly. "Call Dr. Harrison right now. Tell him to come to the house as soon as possible." An hour later, the doctor, a gray-haired man who had known the family for many years, sat on the edge of Lily's bed, listening to her heartbeat with his stethoscope. Physically, she's perfectly fine, he said, taking the stethoscope out of his ears. But emotionally, she's very distressed about something. Something is deeply troubling her inside. She's been upset ever since her nanny left, Michael said, trying to explain. The doctor's eyes flicked toward him quickly. Not a nanny, I think. The housekeeper mentioned a woman named Sarah to me. Michael's whole body stiffened. She was just a maid. Nothing more than that. Sometimes the ones who seem like nothing more are the exact ones children trust the most, the doctor said wisely, standing up and adjusting his coat. Mr. Stone, grief isn't just about someone dying. Sometimes it's about losing the feeling of safety. You might want to consider bringing that woman back, at least to talk with the child, and let her have some closure. Michael's face turned hard as stone. That's absolutely not an option for us. The doctor nodded politely, understanding he couldn't push any further. Then I suggest you be ready for the consequences of that decision. When the doctor left the mansion, the whole place fell back into its hollow, empty quiet. Michael stayed near Lily's door for a moment, listening to her faint humming through the wood. It was the same song Sarah used to sing to her. He walked away quickly, as if putting distance between himself and the sound could somehow drown it out and make it disappear. That evening in Brooklyn, Sarah finished wiping down the church pews until they gleamed. The smell of lemon furniture polish mixed with the waxy smell of candles. Her new work wasn't glamorous or fancy at all, but it was steady and reliable, and the pastor often thanked her for doing more than just cleaning. You make this place feel lived in and loved, he told her one day. As she was closing up her cleaning supplies in the closet, a young woman from the soup kitchen poked her head into the church sanctuary. Hey, Sarah, there's a guy outside asking for you specifically. He says he's from Stone Enterprises. Her entire body went tense and stiff. What did you say? He's wearing an expensive suit and he looks really nervous, the woman explained. Sarah hesitated, her heart starting to pound. Then she stepped outside into the fading sunlight. A man stood near the church gate with his posture rigid but very uncertain, like he didn't want to be there. Miss Miller? He asked when he saw her. Yes, that's me, she answered carefully. I'm Robert, Mr. Stone's personal assistant. He sent me here to find you. Her stomach dropped and twisted. What does he want? From me. The man shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. He asked me to give you this, he said, holding out a small white envelope. Sarah took it but didn't open it right away. Did he say why he was sending this? She asked. The assistant looked down at the ground. He just said he wanted to make things right between you. She stared at the man. Does he even know what that means? What making things right actually requires? The assistant looked uncomfortable. I honestly don't think he does, but he's trying, I can tell you that much. She nodded slowly, then turned the envelope over and over in her hands. Her name was written on it in neat, careful handwriting. Miss Sarah Miller. She carefully opened it and pulled out what was inside. It was a check. A very large check with more money than she'd ever seen, and a short note that said, for your trouble and inconvenience. My sincere apologies. Her jaw tightened with anger. For my trouble? Like I was just an inconvenience to him? Like I was a bad business investment that didn't work out? She folded the check once, then folded it again, and handed it right back to the surprised assistant. Tell him to keep his money, she said firmly. There are some things money can't fix, no matter how much you have. The assistant swallowed nervously. He'll be very disappointed to hear that. Sarah gave a small laugh that had no humor in it at all. I seriously doubt that. Men like him don't get disappointed. They just get even with people. When she turned to walk back toward the church, the man called out softly behind her. Miss Miller, I just want you to know, he really did look sorry when he wrote that note. She paused at the door but didn't turn around to look at him. If that's actually true, she said quietly, then he can come and say it to me himself, like a real person. That night when she tucked Marcus into bed and pulled his blanket up to his chin, he asked her, Did you find a new job today, Mom? I did, baby, she said, smoothing his hair. Is it a good one? He asked. Does it make you happy? She thought about the warm sunlight coming through the church windows, the laughter of the volunteers working together, the good feeling of helping people who didn't expect anything in return from her. It does, sweetie. It really and truly does make me happy. Across the city in his huge mansion, Michael stood at the bar in his dimly lit office. The rejected check and note were lying on his desk where his assistant had left them after returning from Brooklyn. His assistant had already called to report Sarah's answer and her exact words. Michael had said absolutely nothing in reply. He had only nodded his head once. Now he poured himself a drink he didn't actually want and stared at his own reflection in the dark window glass. "You can't buy forgiveness," he murmured to himself, repeating Sarah's words to the empty room around him. Behind him, a small voice suddenly startled him and made him jump. "You tried to buy something again, didn't you, Daddy?" He turned around quickly. Lily was standing in the doorway wearing her nightgown and clutching her teddy bear. "How do you know that?" he asked, trying to sound calm and normal. "I heard Mrs. Patterson talking on the phone. You sent Miss Sarah money, didn't you?" "I was just trying to help and make things better," he said weakly. "Then why do you look so sad right now?" she asked, studying his face. He didn't know how to answer that, because sometimes doing what seems right doesn't make you feel right inside afterward. He finally said. Lily blinked her big eyes at him. "Then maybe you should do what actually is right instead of what just seems right." Her innocence and simple wisdom cut deeper than any accusation could have. "And what's that, sweetheart?" "What's the right thing?" he asked. "Say you're sorry to her. Just say it with your real words," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words would come out. She turned to leave, her small voice fading as she walked down the hall. Miss Emma would have already done it by now. She wouldn't wait. That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep in her bed, Michael sat alone in his office, watching the city lights twinkling beyond the trees. Outside, the cheap bracelet still lay on his desk where he'd left it. For the first time, he picked it up not as evidence of his mistake, not as a symbol of his guilt, but as something fragile and precious that needed protecting. He turned it over and over in his hand, feeling the roughness of each individual bead. Then he whispered to the empty air around him, "I'll go tomorrow. I'll make this right tomorrow." The next morning, sunlight filtered through thin clouds over Brooklyn, painting Sarah's small apartment in quiet golden light. Sarah woke up early, not because of her usual habit, but because something inside her had finally shifted and changed. The voicemail from Mrs. Patterson, the envelope she had returned, the memory of Lily's tiny arms clutching her tight. All of it kept looping in her head like a movie that refused to end. She looked over at Marcus, still sound asleep with his small hand curled into a fist near his cheek. He had his father's eyelashes, long and soft and beautiful. She brushed his hair gently and whispered, "Time to get up, sunshine." He mumbled something she couldn't understand, rolled over, and then blinked his eyes open. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" he asked. Hopefully she smiled. "We have 1 egg and half a cup of milk left, that's all." "That's enough for small pancakes," he said confidently, like it was a scientific fact. So they made them together, thin and slightly lumpy but warm and sweet, while Marcus ate his pancakes. Sarah's phone suddenly buzzed on the counter. The caller ID read unknown number. She hesitated, her stomach tightening with nervousness. "Hello," she answered carefully. "Miss Miller?" It was a woman's voice, soft and steady. "This is Dr. Harrison. I'm Lily Stone's physician. I hope you don't mind me calling." Emma's grip on the phone got tighter. "Is Lily okay? Is she hurt?" "She's physically fine," the doctor assured her. "But emotionally she's been struggling quite a lot. She keeps mentioning you by name. I thought you should know what's happening." "Did Mr. Stone ask you to call me?" Sarah asked. "No," the doctor said quietly. "He definitely wouldn't do that, but I think he needs someone to push him in the right direction. Sometimes adults are much slower to heal than children are." "Doctor," Sarah said after a long pause, "thank you for telling me all this, but I can't go back there, not after what he did to me." "Then maybe you don't go back for him," the doctor replied gently. "Maybe you go back for her, for Lily." The phone line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at it in her hand. Marcus was watching her from across the table. "Is that about your old job?" he asked, something like that. "Yes," she said. "Is the little girl okay?" He wanted to know. "She will be," Sarah said, though she didn't quite believe her own words yet. Across the river, Michael Stone stood outside Lily's school, waiting by his car. He had cleared his entire morning schedule just to take her to school himself, an attempt to fix what was breaking between them. When she came down the steps with her small backpack, she didn't smile at all. "You're early today," she said flatly with no emotion. "I wanted to see you off to school properly," he explained. "Miss Sarah used to walk with me to school sometimes. She'd bring muffins," he nodded, feeling shame pressing down on him like a heavy weight. "Would you like to stop and get some muffins?" Lily didn't answer him at all. She just climbed into the car and turned her face toward the window. On the drive to school, Michael tried again to connect with her. "I'm sorry for yelling at you the other night. That wasn't right." "You yell a lot, Daddy," she said quietly. "You're absolutely right about that. I'm trying really hard not to do it anymore." "Then try harder," she said, her words simple but cutting. The driver kept his eyes straight ahead on the road, pretending he couldn't hear any of their conversation. When they finally arrived at the school gate, Lily turned suddenly to look at her father. "Daddy," she said. "Yes, sweetheart." "When people make mistakes, do they always get a second chance to fix them?" she asked. He hesitated, not sure how to answer. "Sometimes they do, yes." "Then you should give her one," Lily said simply. She hopped out of the car before he could say anything back. The words stayed with him long after she disappeared into the crowd of children going into the school building. He sat in the car for a moment longer, then told his driver, "Take me to Brooklyn." The man's eyebrows lifted up in surprise, but he said nothing and just started driving. 45 minutes later, the sleek black car pulled up beside an aging brick apartment building with a cracked front stoop. Michael stepped out, adjusting his tie nervously. For the first time in many years, he looked completely out of place, not because of his wealth, but because of his uncertainty about what he was doing. He climbed the narrow stairs slowly, the scent of laundry detergent and fried onions heavy in the stale air, and knocked on the third-floor door marked with the number 3B. The door opened halfway. Sarah stood there looking wary and cautious, wearing a simple blue shirt and jeans. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw who it was. "Mr. Stone," she said, surprised. "Miss Miller," he replied. The silence stretched between them like a rope pulled tight. Finally, she said, "You shouldn't be here." "I know I shouldn't," he admitted, "but I needed to see you." "For what?" she asked, crossing her arms. "To hand me another check with more money?" He shook his head. "No, no money this time, I promise." "Then what do you want?" she asked, her voice hard. "To say that I was wrong." The words came out of his mouth rough and unpracticed, like he'd never said them before in his life. "I fired you without listening to your side. I accused you of something you didn't do, and I hurt my own daughter in the process of all that." She studied his face carefully. "Why now? Why come here now?" "Because she won't eat. She won't sleep. She's afraid of me, and she keeps asking for you every single day." His voice cracked slightly. "And also because I finally saw the maintenance report. You saved her life, and I threw you out like garbage." For a long time, Sarah didn't speak. She just stood there. Marcus peeked out from behind her leg, curious about who was at their door. "Mom, who is it?" "It's okay, baby," she murmured gently. "Go back inside." He obeyed reluctantly, but his eyes stayed on the stranger in the expensive suit. "He looks like one of those rich men from the news on TV," Marcus whispered before disappearing into the kitchen. Michael let out a breath, and a faint smile ghosted across his serious face. "You have a really good son." "He's everything to me, my whole world," she said. "I can see that clearly," Michael replied. "So what do you want, Mr. Stone? What exactly do you want from me?" Sarah asked again. "To make this right," he said simply and honestly. "I can't undo what I did to you, but I would like to try to fix it." "By doing what?" she asked. "By apologizing to you properly and to Lily, and by asking if you would consider coming back, not as a maid, but as something more important, someone who can help me make sure this kind of thing never happens again." "You mean a job?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "I mean a chance to fix what I broke, a real chance." She studied him for a long, long moment, then slowly shook her head. "It's not that easy. You can't just fix this." "I know it's not easy," he agreed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You terrified your own daughter. You judged me just because of where I come from and what kind of work I do." "Yes," he admitted, his voice quiet, "and I'm deeply ashamed of all of that." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard and disarmed her completely. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, but just a man, flawed, tired, and really trying to be better. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." Just think about it, he nodded once, stepped back from the door, and turned toward the stairs. Before he reached the first step, she called out softly, "Mr. Stone." He looked back at her. "Tell Lily I miss her very much." His expression softened like ice. Melting, she'll want to hear that more than anything. When he reached the street below, he drew a deep breath and looked up at the gray sky overhead. It felt strange being humbled like this, but it also felt lighter somehow, like something heavy in him had finally loosened at last. Back upstairs, Sarah leaned against the closed door, her heart racing in her chest. Marcus came out from the kitchen with a glass of milk in his hands. "Was that the bad man who yelled at you?" he asked. "He's not a bad man," she said quietly. "He's just lost and trying to find his way." Marcus handed her the glass of milk. "Then maybe you should help him find his way back." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I should." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain and the smell of possibility. That afternoon, the Stone mansion felt different somehow, less like a cold monument and more like a place holding its breath. Michael returned from Brooklyn much slower than he had left. His mind kept replaying every single word Sarah had said to him. "It's not that easy." He kept hearing it, turning it over and over like a smooth stone in his hand. Pride had been his armor for so many years, but now it only felt heavy and uncomfortable. As he stepped inside the front door, Mrs. Patterson looked up from the entrance hall. "Welcome home, sir," she said softly, as though she was unsure whether she should speak at all. "Is Lily awake?" he asked. "Yes, sir. She's out in the garden," he hesitated. Before heading that way, following the path of pale stones until he saw his daughter sitting beneath the big magnolia tree. Her small hands were busy arranging flowers in a perfect circle, her curls glinting in the afternoon light like gold. For a moment, he just stood there watching her. She looked so peaceful and yet so far away from him. "Hey there," he said gently, walking closer. She looked up, cautious. "Did you go to work today?" "Not exactly," he said, crouching down beside her. "I went to see Miss Sarah." Her eyes got huge and wide. "You did? You really did?" "Yes, I did," he confirmed. "Did she yell at you?" Lily asked. He smiled faintly. "No, she had every right to yell at me, but she didn't do that." "Did you tell her you were sorry?" "I did tell her that," he said. "Good," Lily said, picking up another flower and adding it to her circle. "What did she say back?" "She said she would think about it." "Think about what?" Lily asked. "Coming back to visit you." Her face lit up for the first time in weeks. It was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Really? She might come back here." "Really," he said, watching her beam with happiness, her small shoulders relaxing. "But," he added carefully, "that depends on her. We have to give her space and time. We can't force her." "I can wait," Lily said firmly, "but I'm going to make her something special." "What kind of something?" he asked. "A thank you gift," she said proudly. "Because she saved me and you yelled at her. That means both of us owe her something." Richard blinked at her complete honesty. Then he actually chuckled softly. "That's very fair." That evening, while the mansion settled into its usual nighttime hush, Lily sat at her desk in her pajamas with crayons spread all across the wood surface. She drew 3 figures holding hands under a big tree, herself, her father, and Sarah. When she was completely done, she added a 4th figure, a small boy with curly hair. She wasn't sure why she added him, but it felt right somehow. Downstairs, Michael stood in his office with a glass of water, staring at the framed family photo on his desk, the one with his late wife Lillian in it. He touched the glass lightly with his fingertips. "You would have liked her," he murmured to the photo. He meant Sarah, though he couldn't yet say the words out loud to anyone. The next morning, he called his assistant on the phone. "Cancel the public relations response about the elevator incident," he said firmly. "Sir, but that story could still become public and hurt your reputation," the assistant protested. "Then let it," Michael said. "If reporters ask questions, tell them the complete truth." "The truth, sir?" the assistant asked, sounding shocked. "Yes, that I made a terrible mistake, that I was wrong." The assistant hesitated on the other end of the line. "Yes, Mr. Stone, I'll take care of it." After hanging up the phone, Michael checked his watch. It was early enough that Lily was still asleep. He drove back toward Brooklyn. This time without the fancy black sedan or any security escort, just his own regular car, the way normal people traveled every day. The city looked completely different that morning. The haze had lifted and everything seemed clearer. On the corner near the church, he saw people setting up folding tables for a community breakfast. Volunteers were ladling oatmeal into bowls and pouring coffee for anyone who asked. Among them, he spotted her, Sarah, wearing a plain blue sweater and jeans, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail, laughing with a group of kids as she handed out plates of food. Her laughter caught him completely off guard. It wasn't loud or fake. It was just real and genuine. He stood by his car for a moment just watching her before he started walking over. "Miss Miller," he said. She turned around, her smile fading into surprise. "Mr. Stone," she said slowly. "You again?" "I come bearing no check this time," he said, raising his hand slightly. "Just breakfast?" She crossed her arms but couldn't quite hide a small smirk. "You planning to serve oatmeal to strangers, Mr. Stone?" "If it gets me forgiveness, I'll start with the coffee pot," he said seriously. "It's heavy," she warned him. "I can handle it," he replied. She watched him for a moment longer before nodding toward the table. "Fine, but don't you dare complain when someone calls you sir too much." For the next hour, they worked side by side serving food. He poured coffee while she handed out bowls of oatmeal. Occasionally, their hands would brush against each other, and neither of them spoke about it. At one point, a homeless man took his cup of coffee and said, "You look really familiar. Are you one of them rich TV guys?" Michael smiled faintly, something like that. "Yes. You ain't too proud to pour coffee though, huh?" the man observed. "I'm trying not to be proud anymore," Michael said honestly. The man grinned, showing missing teeth. "Then you're doing okay in my book." After the crowd thinned out and most people had left, Sarah untied her apron. "I'll admit, you lasted a lot longer than I thought you would. I've had tougher board meetings," he said, smiling, "but this felt a whole lot better." "You surprised me, Mr. Stone," she said. "Surprising people might be my only skill left," he joked. She chuckled softly. "You really came all the way here just to serve coffee to homeless people?" "No," he said, his tone becoming softer. "I came to see if you would visit Lily." Emma's expression became gentle. "How is she doing?" "She's hurting," he admitted. "She misses you terribly." "She's making you something," he added. "Something?" "A drawing, I think, and probably a lecture for me too." Sarah laughed quietly. "She's a really good kid." "She's yours as much as mine, it seems," he said, before realizing the truth of what he had just said out loud. "She needed you then, Miss Miller, and I need you too, but not as staff, as someone who reminds me what actually matters in life." Sarah looked away quickly, blinking fast. "You say that like I'm some kind of saint." "No," he said softly. "I say it like someone who finally met one decent person who didn't ask for anything in return." "That's not true," she protested. "I do ask for something." "What?" he asked. "I ask for respect," she said. "Then you'll have it," he replied firmly, "starting right now, today." She stared at him for a long moment, uncertain whether to believe him or not. Then she said, "I'll come by for Lily, just for her." "That's all I hoped for," he said. "Not for you," she added, making it clear. "For her. I understand completely," he smiled faintly. "But maybe I'll get lucky and earn a little bit of that grace too." She shook her head but couldn't help smiling. "You talk like a man trying to fix his soul." "Maybe I am trying to do exactly that," he said seriously. "That's a very long road, Mr. Stone," she warned. "Then I'll walk it," he said, "even if it takes the rest of my life." As she gathered her things to leave, the church bells rang in the distance. Sarah looked at him one last time and said, "If you really mean that, start by showing Lily you can be gentle with her. She doesn't need a rich father. She needs a good one," he nodded. "I'll remember that." And for the first time, she actually believed he might. 2 days later, the Stone estate woke to an unusual sound. Laughter. It was small and uncertain at first, but it was unmistakably Lily's laughter. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the garden room where she sat cross-legged on the carpet with crayons scattered all around her, humming to herself. For weeks, that room had been completely silent. Now it breathed again with life. Mrs. Patterson stood by the doorway, smiling softly to herself. "She's been up since dawn, sir," she whispered as Michael approached. "She said she had something important to finish." He nodded. "Let her be." But Lily spotted him anyway. "Daddy, look at this." She held up a drawing for stick figures under a big tree, the same one she had drawn before, but this time it was colored in with bright yellow and green. You, me, Miss Sarah, and Marcus, she explained. Marcus? He asked, confused. Her boy, she said matter-of-factly. If she comes here, I want him to come too. He looks nice in my head. Michael took the drawing very carefully, his throat feeling tight. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Can we give it to her today? Lily asked hopefully. He hesitated. Maybe if she's ready. I think she's ready, Lily said with the absolute faith that only children have. That afternoon, Sarah and Marcus stood at the gates of the Stone property. The air was heavy with early summer warmth. The car ride up had been quiet. Marcus had spent most of it staring out the window at the long rows of perfectly trimmed hedges, the kind he had only ever seen in movies. Mom, he whispered as they approached the huge front door. Are we in trouble? She smiled faintly at him. Not this time, baby. The butler opened the door. Mr. Stone and Miss Lily are expecting you. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. Polished marble floors, a grand staircase, chandeliers hanging like frozen fire. Yet to Sarah, the house felt different somehow, less cold than before, as if someone had opened a window and let air in. Lily appeared at the very top of the stairs, wearing a yellow dress, her curls bouncing as she ran down as fast as her legs could carry her. Miss Sarah, she cried out, throwing herself into Sarah's arms. Sarah knelt down immediately, holding her tightly, feeling the child's heartbeat against her shoulder. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered. I missed you so much. Lily pulled back just enough to look at her face. I knew you would come back. I just knew it. Then she looked over Sarah's shoulder at Marcus standing nervously behind her. You must be him, she said. Marcus blinked. Me? Marcus, Lily said solemnly. Do you like pancakes? Yeah, I love them, he said. Good, she said seriously. I'll ask the cook to make some for us right now. Their laughter filled the big hall, soft and a little awkward, but it was healing laughter. Michael stood nearby with his hands clasped loosely, watching the reunion. There was something very humbling about it. The way forgiveness seemed to come so easily to young children when grown men like him had to claw their way toward it. Miss Miller, he said quietly when Sarah looked up at him. Mr. Stone, she replied. Thank you for coming here. I didn't come for you, she said, though her tone was gentle and not mean. I know, he said, but I'm grateful anyway. They moved to the sunroom where Mrs. Patterson had set out lemonade and a plate of cookies. The room smelled faintly of jasmine flowers. Lily and Marcus sat on the rug, building towers from wooden blocks, their laughter rising and falling like music. Michael leaned against the doorway watching them. I'm not sure I deserve this peace, he said softly to Sarah. Peace isn't about deserving it, Sarah replied. It's about choosing it. He studied her carefully. Do you really believe that? I have to, she said. Otherwise life is just punishment. Without any purpose, he nodded, looking at his daughter playing happily. She's different when you're here. It's like she can breathe again. Children know when something's wrong, Sarah said. Even if we pretend it isn't. She felt your anger, but she also feels your change now. That's a good start. He exhaled, a small shaky sound. I'm trying to be better, I really am. I can see that, she said quietly, a pause stretched between them, filled only by the children's voices and laughter. Then Lily looked up suddenly. Daddy, Miss Sarah says we should plant a tree, one for second chances, Sarah laughed. I didn't say it exactly like that, sweetheart. Yes, you did, Lily insisted stubbornly. You said everyone deserves to grow again. Michael smiled faintly. Then we'll plant one today, right now. The children cheered with excitement. Within an hour, the four of them stood in the backyard. The gardener handed over a small baby tree, a young maple. Lily and Marcus took turns, scooping soil with little shovels while Sarah knelt beside them, guiding their hands gently. Michael loosened his tie, crouched down in his expensive suit, and helped pat the earth into place around the roots. When the hole was completely filled with soil, Lily clapped her hands together. There, now it's official. Official? Michael asked. It's our second chance tree, she said proudly, and you can't yell near it, that's the rule. He laughed softly. I'll remember that rule. Sarah brushed her hands off on her jeans. She's right, you know. Sometimes a little thing like this can change how a whole place feels. It already has, he said, looking at the small tree, then looking at her. You've changed everything. She shook her head. No, Mr. Stone, you did that when you finally decided to listen. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the children ran inside for more lemonade. Richard and Emma remained in the garden, a warm breeze moving through the magnolia branches above them. I was going to build another wing on this house, he said, looking around. Now I'm thinking of something completely different. Like what? She asked curiously. A foundation, he said slowly, for safety training, maybe first aid and education for everyone. If I had something like that in place before, none of this would have happened. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. If you're serious about it, I could help you. I've seen what panic looks like up close. His gaze softened. Then help me build it. Together. Together, she echoed quietly, though there was a hint of disbelief in her voice. He extended his hand toward her. After a beat, she took it and shook it. As they shook hands, Lily's laughter drifted from the house. The sun warmed the earth around their newly planted tree. And for the first time ever, Michael felt the mansion breathe, not with power or wealth, but with real life. The following morning, the stone mansion stirred earlier than usual. The air smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee and blooming jasmine from the garden. For the first time in months, the house did not feel like a museum. It felt lived in and loved. Michael Stone walked into the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up and no tie, a rare sight that made Mrs. Patterson nearly drop the teapot she was holding. Good heavens, she murmured. The master of the house making his own breakfast. He smiled faintly. Don't faint on me, Mrs. Patterson. I just want some coffee and maybe toast. Miss Lily's already awake, she said. She's in the garden with Miss Sarah and the boy. He froze with his hand on the coffee mug. They're here already? They came early, Mrs. Patterson said. She said something about checking on the tree we planted. Michael felt something unfamiliar tug in his chest. It was anticipation mixed with humility. He walked toward the garden doors, pausing for just a second before stepping out. Outside, the morning light filtered through the magnolia branches, making spots of gold on the ground. Sarah knelt by the new maple tree with her fingers gently pressing the soil around its base. Caleb and Lily were beside her, giggling over something whispered between them. You have to water it every morning, Marcus was saying seriously. My grandpa used to say trees are like people, they grow if you talk nice to them. Lily nodded solemnly. Then we'll tell it stories. Sarah laughed, a low, warm sound that made Michael's heart tighten in his chest. She looked up just as he stepped outside. Morning, Mr. Stone, she said, brushing dirt from her palms. Morning, he replied. Looks like the tree's in good hands. It's doing better than most of us, she said softly. He smiled a little, crouching beside the children. So, what are we naming it? Lily thought really hard. Hope, Marcus nodded. That's a good one. Then hope it is, Michael said, touching the trunk gently. The children ran toward the house a moment later, arguing cheerfully about who would get the first glass of lemonade. The